Draw stuff with Roger. Hi guys, hope everybody's doing okay today. We're gonna just start a new project, and I'm gonna make whatever size you want. It doesn't really matter if you're following along. I'm just gonna kind of show you how I make a quick animation. We're gonna do a just kind of bingo, bango, bongo kind of thing, and do it quick. So I'm gonna add a blue background. Just take the bucket, put a line across. Doesn't matter which brush you use at all. Um, Makes no difference really, as long as it makes a solid line. And then I'm going to fill the top a little lighter, because in the normal sky, when you look at it, it's always a little bit lighter when it's close to you, and it kind of looks darker at the edge. Sometimes it's the opposite. I tend to like to do things this way. Um, Everybody's got their own way to do things. Some people put all kinds of color in the sky as well. I'm just doing a simple one here, and I'm gonna keep it real simple for you guys. So we're gonna do the fill brush. We're gonna first use the wrong brush, and then we're gonna pick one of the fill brushes. And I'm just making shapes here. It's about shapes and colors. This is not about doing anything really nice or proper. I'm just picking some colors. I'm going to try and make it lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. That's really the only thing I'm trying to do here, is make random shapes. And the more random the better, because in nature there are patterns, but to our eye it looks kind of random a lot of the time. So I'm going to add some darker spots where I think there might be darker spots. And this is one thing that Procreate has that isn't quite here yet, which is like a blur tool would be really nice. But for now, we just got to use the smudger for this. So all I'm doing is smudging it, and it's just making the background. So when you want a forest in the background, or hills or anything like that, sometimes you just want to make a lot of colors and then smudge them out. And then the more you smudge it, the further it kind of goes back into the background. And we're going to add a mid layer here, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing. Now, at the end of this video, I kind of looked back, and I really didn't need this layer to be exactly like this. I could have probably done without it. But if I wanted to make this video into a little more complex one and get a parallax effect, having 3 layers, 3 or 4 layers even, kind of makes it better in the end, because then you can just shift around the different layers and kind of make a camera movement out of it. So I'm adding a little bit of wood into this one's, or a little bit of brown, so make it look like wood when you blend it in, so it just looks like there's trees somewhere in there. And the human brain will fill in so many spots that sometimes the clearer the image, the worse the message. Like sometimes the message doesn't get across all the way. So sometimes you just got to let the brain take over and do its thing. And then in the foreground here, what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little darker on the bottom. So I'm going to make a dark bottom layer, which I like to do. I use a dark brown or a dark green. It really doesn't matter too much. If you want to know how to make these grass brushes, I have a video of that. It's Studio Ghibli grass. It's a pretty cool way to do it. I really enjoy this kind of grass technique. You got to make sure to add some different colors in and different shades, and kind of randomize it as much as you can. And I'll even go in, if I was making something more complicated, I would go in and put in flowers and different things, and have different color palettes. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting a little bit of light grass 1 layer back, and then I'm going to smudge it out a little bit. Just a little bit. Just so there's the idea that there's grass in front and behind. So when our character is in the middle of that, you can kind of, there's a continuity of the picture. So you have the same stuff going on all the layers, but it's a little different. And usually I will label all these layers. But for today, we're trying to just do things quick, so I can get the whole video out and show you the process. So we're not really too worried about that. So we're going to go through with a black outline. I'm going to put it on full screen here and get it where I want it to be. And sometimes I'll go through and do like a quick sketch first. So right here you see my opacity is not all the way up. I'm just kind of doing a little sketchy sketch to get the idea of what I want. I was going to do a simple bird. It kind of looks a little bit dragony. So it really depends how you look at it. What I want it to be in the end is kind of like a prehistoric looking bird. You can go for any kind of bird you want. You can use a reference. I'm not using any reference or anything for this one, but a reference sometimes does help. Now, I could put a mouth on it right there and make it look kind of like a Yoshi, I guess. But that wasn't what I was going for. So I erased that one. And then I kind of do a good copy. I turn the opacity up and kind of just get what I want coming out there. And it doesn't look great at this point because it's not exactly what I'm going for yet. So I put in a little tiny wing. And when I do birds and things, I generally do the body first, and then I'll do the beak afterwards and kind of adjust it to make it look how I want. And I'm making it prehistoric kind of looking, so I'm not using traditional colors. And you got to make sure everything's closed at the bottom for the fill. I should have erased, or I should have turned off the front grass there to see what I was doing a little bit better. And sometimes you have to adjust the slider at the top to fill all the spots. And I'll put darker down on the bottom for some shadow and pick just another color that I like for the wing, just to make it look a little bit different at least. And then I'll go through and fix up those spots that I don't like. Now, I'm going to go through and put in an eye on this layer. I'm not going to do a blink or anything. If I was going to do that, I would do it separately and then add the eye in. But for, again, the speed of this video, just going to put in an eye. I start with a really light gray, and I put a dark shadow on top. And with the eye, I do the same thing. I start with a lighter color, pick a darker one, and then sometimes you'll have to adjust and round it back out. Then black, and then I use a little white accent. And that's really the only white in the photo usually, or in the picture, is usually that little spot in the eye. Then I'll just clean it up a little bit and get it the way I want. And again, you can add or subtract anything you want. Your creation does not have to be anywhere near what mine is. Sometimes I really enjoy just kind of going wild and doing things that don't exist. And sometimes I use a reference and do something that I know I enjoy looking at just because I want to see it. Again, sometimes it's good to shut off layers so you can see what you're doing. Here, going for speed, did not do that again. It could have been nice. So I'm just creating the outline, doing a fill, and then I'll kind of check it. And sometimes I'll change these colors a couple times to get what I want. And sometimes I forget to switch the bucket to the brush and have to redo that spot. So I like to give this guy a little nose. Remember, the 2-tap is the erase. It's very handy. And then I'm going to try and do the bottom beak here. And I'm doing all these on a different layer. You can do them on the same layer. Or you could go into the library and make this whole bird in the library and make it move and then pull that into the timeline. If I'm doing a longer video or if I'm doing a bunch of videos that are using the same character, I'll create it in the library because then you can move it to different projects and load it into different projects. For this tutorial, it's just a one-time shot, so I didn't really worry about that. Here, you got to watch which layers you're on when you're doing stuff. Sometimes you get a little mixed up. Again, labels really help. And I am not taking my own advice on this one. Sometimes, it's just about efficiency. So I'm doing the tongue inside the bottom jaw so that there's an appearance of a tongue in there. And I'm going to get the color from the top. And I kind of painted everything pink there, but we'll fix that up. Got that little darker color, and then you can just drop the color on the line. It'll fill in the line. And here I filled in the tongue. I didn't notice that for another minute, and you'll see later on in the video I kind of fix it up. So once you have all this set up here, you can do some extra, right? Like here I'm going, okay, well, what else do we need here? And I like to put in some clouds just to add some movement. And that's why I didn't add too much parallax or any of these effects into here, because I just have a simple cloud moving around. Now, this is a brush that basically the lower you put the opacity, the more cloudy it looks. Or the bigger the brush, sorry, the more cloud you get around it. It's kind of an interesting brush. I enjoy it for creating the clouds. So here I'm just kind of adding some white accents here and there, just things that are going to move around enough to give it some depth. And I'm going to put this transform layer here, and I'm going to drag the clouds into, like, when you go to the transform, you press that little, not that one, you press the sideways looking triangle thing, and then you put the layer in. Again, if I labeled it, would have been way better. But now that it's in there, the transform layer controls the cloud. But that also means that the clouds can be put off the main screen. So it means you can move the clouds all the way off of the main screen and have them going all the way across. Now, the new Procreate Dreams has a larger theater, so you can actually create off of the screen, which is kind of cool, and maybe you get a little bit more depth in the pictures that way, because you don't lose, it doesn't pixelate as much. That's something that maybe these guys are going to have to look at down the road, something similar. For now, this works, and that clicking off that little box at the top makes a big difference. So that box, you got to make sure you click that off so that you can animate. So I'm just going to move the clouds around in the background and get them so that they're just moving around. I'm just doing a 30-second video for you guys today, like a 30-second animation, something that you can take and play with and do whatever you want with it after the fact. It's just getting the idea of how to create these layers and levels and give it some depth. That's really all I'm going for today. And simple enough that most people should be able to follow along in some fashion. So I'm going to go and make sure I stretch everything out. So you can go and do it this way and grab it and stretch it out, right? Or you can add a drawing, but you want to do it one frame past where you want it. And then it'll bring the frame all the way up to that layer. And then you can go through and erase the empty ones. It's just kind of a shortcut instead of dragging them all the way down. So here I'm going to put in another layer, and it's going to be another transform layer. And this part actually confused me a little bit, because when you do another transform layer, you see the hierarchy of what you've already put in there. So the clouds are already in there, and it does separate them in movement as long as they're grouped together. So I'm going to have these grouped together. And so I made a mistake here of grouping number 6 under number 7, and that's not where I wanted it. So you can see once I get to where I'm going here that, well, I thought maybe renaming the transform layer would separate it from the other one, but in the end it didn't really make a difference. You could have 5 transform layers. It just looks crowded in there, but really they're a separate entity from each other. But I renamed it just in case. And so sometimes you get the boxes don't make much sense. So I was trying to move this to see if I could have a different separate box for them. But instead I just put the transform layer and then everything under it that I wanted to have controlled. So I put it into the transform layer, and then you can see there everything steps down and to the right a little bit, and that's how you know it's all under the same guys. So here the problem I have is the the box is not anywhere near the bird. So what do you do in this scenario? Backing up is a good idea as well. So in this scenario, a lot of times what I'll do is you go to the layer you want, which is the I'm eventually going to find it here, the transform layer, and then the little tiny enable pivot editing. So you enable that, and then you can move the whole thing and center it on whatever part you want to be able to move. So I want mine to kind of be able to move like a bird. So I centered it close to where the wing is and where I think the pivot would be. And I do the same for the other parts. So here I'm going to click on it and move the pivot and try it out. And here I made the mistakes. I had both of them grouped together. So the underneath pivoted at the same time as the one above, which I'm going to have to go back into the transform layer and fix up here. So all I'm doing is taking it out so it's not underneath the other one and putting it back into the one on top. So now they're both separate. And then here I'm just going to make sure everything is working correctly. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to fix the tongue up here. I'm just going to pick the color, fix the tongue up real quick, and then move on. So I'm going to make sure I'm using the right tools here. And sometimes it's really good to turn those layers off and on properly. Sometimes that's where I'm going a little too fast inside my head sometimes, and I miss some steps. And you can see here that the top beak doesn't line up properly. So I go ahead and I change it. I just move it up just that little bit, and it makes a big difference. And then I'm going to go into the process of animating the character or the creature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the T2 layer that I've made, and I'm going to add a keyframe under position. And I'm going to shrink it down and grow it a couple times because sometimes I have a hard time getting that right spot to just move it. And that's one of the things I struggle with ToonSquid a little bit at times. Once I'm into a project, usually it works out all right. Sometimes at the beginning it just takes me a minute. I'm going to add another keyframe here, and sometimes you can turn it on and off in the settings where you want to add keyframes, or you can have it set so it does it automatically. I like to have it so that I set them so that I don't accidentally do it, because I have a little bit of attention deficit going on, so sometimes I really need to not have things automatically happen. I need to be able to control when they happen so that I don't accidentally do 5 things at once. It just kind of helps me out. So I'm making keyframes where I want to move the specific things. The T2 will be moving the whole bird together, and then the other layers will be just moving specific parts, right? And for this one, really, I'm just kind of making it rock a little bit back and forth and making it open and close its mouth, because really 30 frames is all we're working with. We're just doing a simple animation, right? And here we go. This is what the end result looks like, and it's just kind of a simple animation that we are working with, and I enjoy the way it looks. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments or want to see something else, post it down below. Thanks. Bye-bye.